That speech is even difficult for you to watch, Vian, and you gave it so long ago. The people that you are hearing this impassioned plea about are the Yazidis. They are an ancient religious minority whose estimated 500,000 members live mostly in the hills and towns of northern Iraq and Syria. In June of last year, many of you may remember, ISIS roared into the region and began a murderous campaign of ethnic cleansing against the Yazidis and other ethnic religious groups. The bloodshed goes on to this day. Thousands have died. Hundreds of thousands are displaced and living in terrible conditions in camps, and as many as 5,000 women and girls have been abducted and sold as slaves, sex slaves. The desperate plea that you just saw in that video was made last year by Vian Dakheel. She is one of 2 Yazidi MPs. She is a member of the Iraqi government and parliament, and she is a heroine sitting right here today. Beside her is her sister, Delan Dakheel. She is a resident doctor in the Resgari teaching hospital in Erbil in northern Iraq, and she works as a doctor in the refugee camps near there, and they both have shared with me stories and will share with you horrific, almost unspeakable stories of what women have endured. We are also joined by Alissa Rubin, now Paris bureau chief for the New York Times. Alissa is formerly the paper's Baghdad bureau chief and has been responsible for incredible reporting from Iraq, and brave reporting, I might add, and the Middle East. Beside her is one of America's great champions for women, Melanne. I want to say Melanne, but you say Melanne Verveer. She is a former U.S. ambassador for women and is now director at Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security. Welcome to all of you. Vian, of course, we have to start with you. You are such a brave person to just even be here today because you were targeted by ISIS. I mean, you are a public enemy to them. Tell me, you continue to go out to the regions and visit the refugees. Tell us the status right now, because women have been targeted in a way that they've never been before. Tell us the situation right now.
Yes, thank you. For you, the situation, we have 2 types of the Yazidi people now. One of them are those are displaced or refugees in the Duhok or in the Kurdistan region. The condition of those people are very, very bad. No enough food, no water, no schools, no health center care. I'm speaking about 420,000 people Yazidi people are refugees now in the Kurdistan region. And in the other hand, we have many peoples are kidnapping under ISIS control. 5,000 people, Yazidi people, girls, children, and women and old men are kidnapping by ISIS since now. 3,000 of them are women. And we have 700 kids or children between 4 to 10 years are kidnapping by ISIS and learning them how to fight another people. Those are a new generation of terrorists. Those are my people. Those Yazidi people. Everything happened with the Yazidi only because those are Yazidi, only because those are a different religion from another one or from ISIS.
And they are targeted because they are different. Because you have been so bravely standing up and speaking out, ISIS has targeted you. How worried are you just even sitting here today?
Yes, I know, but I don't matter. It is nothing for me because now I'm not thinking about my life. I'm thinking, how can help those people, those poor people? How can I help the minority in Iraq? How can I help the Yazidi in Iraq? I don't think about my life. It is not important. If you're hearing something about those escaped girls with ISIS, yes, I see my life, it's nothing. How can these small girls, maybe 9 or 10 years, it is with ISIS, and ISIS every day or 10 times in day rape her. When I'm thinking about that, I say my life, it's nothing.
And when we hear about that, Delan, we were talking behind the stage just now about the horrors. Girls as young as 9 years old, repeatedly raped, enduring physical injuries because of it. You have spoken specifically to some of these girls. How do they even bear up under these circumstances? Physically, we know that they're ruined. What about emotionally?
Actually, there are many of these girls who were able to escape that I have been in a direct contact with them. And it is so difficult to cope with their lives. I have adopted one of these girls.
You've adopted one of these girls. A 15-year-old, I think you told me.
Yeah, she is 15 years old. She has been sold 20 times. The last time she was sold by $1.
She was sold for $1.
Yeah. And every time she has been sold, the man that bought her raped her for 6, 7 times. And when he get sick of her, he buy her for another guy to rape her again and again. She's so beautiful. And she's so smart. Her dream was to finish medical school and to become a pediatrician. I'm helping her to make her dream possible. And I promise her that I will keep taking care of her until her mother, who is still kidnapped, to come back to her. Since then, she is calling, we have deal that she will keep calling me mom until her mother will come back. And I promise her that I will take care of her.
She's very fortunate to have you in her life. Alissa, take us back to last year when this crisis first happened. Tell us what you witnessed. How did this, I mean, we know that the Yazidis have been under siege for years. As an ethnic minority, but what triggered last year? What happened?
Well, I think we have to go back and remember a little bit about how the year unfolded, because I think many of us didn't recognize quickly enough what was happening, and this is often the case, particularly, I think, when women's lives are at stake. But it started in January, if you remember, that the Islamic State basically took Fallujah. And that was actually the beginning of a whole process that then people kind of realized something was going wrong. But then in June, Mosul, which is the second largest city in Iraq, fell. And when that happened, there was really the warning that I think many of us didn't pay attention to, which was that the Islamic State came in and it basically expelled Christians. It said you either have to convert to Islam, pay a tax, or go. And basically all the Christians in Mosul fled, with very, very, very tiny numbers remaining behind and secretly practicing Christianity. But that was really a sign that they were going to go after the religious minorities. And there are many in Iraq, but the Yazidis are a very ancient faith and been there for as long as anyone else. And it's a very complex religion which draws on many different traditions. And I think in many ways we should have been more alert of how vulnerable they were. So then, if you flash forward to August, you have, by now, a lot of northern and western Iraq has fallen under control of ISIS. And they began to make incursions into these areas. The Yazidis live in an area of northwestern Iraq, near the Sinjar Mountains. There's a very largest population of them, and they began to go into the villages. And I remember hearing stories as I was reporting up there about how they would come in, and sometimes they would even be kind of not too rough with people at first. and they would be nice for a day or two, and then they would start to issue the ultimatums, leave or convert. Or if you don't convert, then you face death. And that was what began to happen in August, and people began to flee in droves. Some of them were able to drive away, but as Vian said, at least 30,000, I think possibly it was more than that, fled into the mountains.
And left everything behind, all of their possessions.
Everything. Some people were not even with their shoes. I mean, people were terrified. They would look, they would say they saw the black people on motorcycles with black flags, a few of them in trucks coming into town, and they would call each other on the phone and say, "We have to go, they're here." And people would flee. So it was absolutely paralyzing. I mean, these are mostly very, modest people. They might work as craftsmen. They have, they're educated, but they're near a rural area. Some of them have farms. They were completely, I think, unaware of the scale of the threat.
And many of them now still just trying to subsist with very little to nothing, no food, no water, as they're in these refugee camps.
Exactly, and I think the other thing that we didn't recognize very quickly, and I began to hear the stories around about the 10th of August, was that women and girls were being separated from their mothers, from their sisters, from their fathers. So it seemed incredible to me. I remember still a man describing to me how it happened, and he said, "My two daughters, they just put them in a separate group, and then they disappeared." And I thought, oh, well, could that possibly be? And then I heard the story again, and then I came across a man who had lost his second wife. He had more than one wife, which is traditional or not surprising anyway. And he said, "I looked around and she was gone." And he tried to go back to look for her. He still doesn't know if she was pulled aside as they were fleeing. It was that chaotic.
And that's one of the unique parts of this tragedy, Melanne. We were talking backstage about the women. So many of us heard about this attack and this assault last year, but it was only now, I think, that we began to learn, and with your impassioned speech, that we learned about the women and the girls and the rapes, and really sort of using that as a weapon of war, right?
Exactly, and your reference to Vian's role and then what Alissa was able to write about, I think it's important to note that, and for me, it's humbling to sit on this stage with the two of them and with Vian's sister as well, because they're among the most bravest people, the most courageous in terms of what they were, each of them trying to do to raise this to a level of awareness so that the kind of reaction that needed to be done, humanitarian and beyond, would be rendered. But this whole issue of sexual violence and conflict is a horrific problem. It is increasingly being used as a strategic tactic of war by the armed combatants. They are able to achieve their goals by the horrors that they perpetrate in this kind of destruction. We have banned biological weapons, we've banned chemical weapons, we have agreements on nuclear, and somehow sexual violence is still viewed as normal or expected. Well, there's nothing normal about it. It is horrific, and it is unspeakable. And if you look at the DRC, which has been one of the most violent places with a conflict that rages more than a decade, what happened in Bosnia, 75% of women raped in the civil war in Liberia, what happened in Rwanda, these are real situations that have to be dealt with. And today's story is a catastrophic evolution in all of that, because the terrorists and the extremists have adopted this tactic in ways that are unimaginable, which you heard Vian and her sister describe. And we need to ensure that in the policies that are being adopted and the roles that are being played out by governments, et cetera, that the gender implications of this are front and center. and that we address them in ways that significantly need to be addressed.
Vian, you have ventured into these camps. You have met with a lot of these women and young girls. What did they ask of you? I mean, of course, they want to be reunited with their families. They want to somehow get their lives back. But what did they want you to say to the world? I know your English is, and I'm speaking maybe a little too fast. You've been doing very well.
عندما قابلت هؤلاء الفتيات ماذا هم يطلبون منك لإيصاله إلى العالم؟
Yes, all of those girls ask me one thing. How can the international community help those girls? Because you know, in Iraq and in Kurdistan also, we don't have a specific center, health center, to help those escaped girls.
Like the trauma centers.
Yes, trauma. We don't have a trauma center. And all of those girls need to treat them, to help them, and to give them a hope for a new life. But we don't have this center. And I don't know, how can I do for them?
There are terrible stories of some of these girls who have taken their own lives, who have, we were talking in Delan earlier, some of these girls have even committed suicide. The ones who did manage to escape, how did they escape?
Sometimes those girls are run away, find maybe a way to run, and sometimes we are buying the girls, those girls. Do you know, when I say we are buying our girls, it is very, very, very sad thing, because we are in the 2015, and it should be to buy my daughter or my sister. It is very difficult thing. Now I should be to some man call me before 2 days, say, please, Vian, some of those ISIS, call him and tell him your daughter with me, and I sold your daughter. If you have a money, you can buy here.
Buy her back.
Yes, but the man, he's a very poor man. He said, I don't have a $2,000 to buy my daughters. The daughter's age, it is 11. And he was crying, and he said, Vian, please, how can I do? I need to buy back my daughter, because I lost my wife, I lost my family, I lost all my daughters and boy and my family. I need to return back these girls.
Delan, tell me a little bit about the two girls. You said that one of them you've actually adopted. There was also a 9-year-old girl that you met who had been assaulted. We know that rape carries a stigma and a shame everywhere, even in this country, but particularly in this region. The shame and the stigma is very strong, isn't it?
In our culture, rape is a very difficult thing, and it's really a large stigma for those girls. That's why I have another story that I like to share with you, but unfortunately I'm going to use fake names because based on their request.
Understandably.
Yeah, young lady begged me to broadcast a story that she witnessed in one of the houses that she were kept in. A 9-year-old lady, a 9-year-old kid. She was the only sibling for her parents. When ISIS attacked their houses, they were not able to escape. The ISIS fighters killed her father in their backyard in front of her eyes, and they took the 9-year-old baby and her mother, and they enslaved them in one of the houses in Tel Afar, which is a district near Sinjar. And every morning, ISIS fighters came into that house, and And they collected those ladies in one hall and start choosing what girl they are going to rape this morning. Imagine yourself every morning waiting and wishing it's not you that will be chosen to be raped. And one of those mornings, an old man around 50 or 60 years old came into that hall, and he walked toward that mother with her 9-year-old kid sitting in her lap. The mother was so afraid that they will take her, and who is going to look after her kid, and how she is going to be alone going through this, and she's only 9. But the disaster was that they took the kid to be raped. At that time, her mother got crazy, and she started to forbid them when they burned her hands. But she did not stop. She started screaming and not letting them take her 9-year-old kid. At that time, they shoot her in the head in front of all other girls, and they left her there in her blood. They took the 9-year-old kid, and the lady that told me the story, she said, till now I cannot forget her voice when she was screaming when they were raping her. I still hear it in my head every night when I go to sleep. They raped her, but her small body could not tolerate, and from the first sexual experience, she bleeded till death, and she died.
Unspeakable stories, unspeakable. Alissa, on this mountain where the refugees are, you and Vian had an experience last year when you were, with everybody trapped on this mountain, there was an effort to try to get food out, and you two were part of a helicopter ride that almost ended in disaster. Tell us about it.
Well, we had both gone up, I think, for similar reasons, because we felt committed to understanding what was happening to the people who had fled to the mountain. And it was both an effort to deliver food and to bring back people who were extremely ill so they could get medical treatment. And we got there, and we delivered a lot of bread and bananas, as I remember.
Yes.
And I think
And
we were
juice
both
and
sitting on...
juice and water.
And juice, right. And then they put as many people as they could on the helicopter so we could take them down. And regrettably, it was too many people, and the helicopter was too heavy, and the pilot had trouble lifting off from the mountain. And finally, he seemed to have gotten to the edge of the cliff, where it dropped, and he was able to launch it off the cliff, but it hit something, and that put it into a spin. It got unbalanced. The helicopters are very delicate, and it crashed. And
you both could have died, but miraculously
we didn't. We're very lucky to be here. The pilot, who was trying to do the right thing, sadly did die.
Yeah.
He was an Iraqi, and just doing this on an off day for him. And Vian just told me before that apparently 2 small children died as well. So it was a shattering experience, and I can only hope that it didn't stop the effort entirely to save those people on the mountain. Eventually, there were a whole lot of other things done that helped them get off by the Kurds who were rescuing them.
But so many people still trapped in these camps, some of them in safe conditions now, but still trapped. Melanne, we don't want to leave without at least feeling a shred of hope of trying to help. What can people in this audience do? And what can any of us around the world do to not only spotlight this crisis, but to try to help these women and girls and also all the others who are being held at this moment?
Deb, that's really one of the most important questions, because indeed there are perils to our indifference. And when you hear these unspeakable stories and you think of the girls, the women, wondering, is anybody there for them? We have to be those people who are there for them, acting for one with a megaphone to keep this out there. This crisis is not over. We've forgotten about the dramatic moments, but the crisis continues. There are all kinds of supports that are needed by the refugees today. You heard that there's no real health care being provided, and yet there's tremendous physical trauma and psychotrauma. There needs to be healing and therapies of all kinds. There need to be opportunities for girls to have skills and feel they have something to move forward with in their lives. So we need to ensure that refugee services are there and that we're supporting the organizations who are involved in that. I know that Vian is setting up a foundation, and you will hear more from Women in the World about what you can do to bring that kind of support that she is so mindful of that is needed. And then beyond that, we have to hold our governments accountable. Governments have signed on to commitments to address this issue of sexual violence and conflict and to ensure that women's voices are being heard and they're being listened to in the evolution of the policies that are being adopted. It was 15 years this coming October that the United Nations Security Council adopted a resolution that has been improved many times over that focuses on the role of women in peace and security and has two major pillars: protection, and that's what we're talking about, and participation, listening to the women and ensuring that they have a role in all of this. We are far from realizing those goals, and the problems, as we heard here, continue and in many ways have been intensified by the extremist terrorist activities today. So I think we need a greater focus, and we need to hold our own international agencies, our own governments, ask the questions, and ensure that we are doing everything that we need to be doing to address these problems. It's present and it's future, because there has to be accountability as well for the crimes that have been committed: genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes. Forensics need to be worked on today to develop those cases so that at some point the international justice systems can bring some outcomes to these horrors that are being perpetrated.
And speaking of the United Nations Security Council, you spoke before the council a few weeks ago, and you are putting a spotlight on this problem and putting your own life really in jeopardy, Vian, and we can't thank you enough for all that you are doing. And thank you for being here, Vian and Delan and Alissa, and thank you all so very much.